have 4:30 is, let me see. Alder Corpus Dax is here. Is Brian here yet?
He is. He's in the corner.
All right. All right. Joe, are we ready to go?
Yep, we're ready, and we're recording.
Okay. All right. So this is the Personnel Committee meeting on April 27th. It's 4:30. I'll call this meeting to order, and we'll start out with roll call. Alder Corpus Dax.
Here.
Alder Johnson.
Here.
Alder Dorf.
Here.
And obviously, I think I'm here. I'll entertain a motion on the agenda.
So move to approve.
I have a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Has anyone have any question? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve those.
Motion approved. Second.
All right. I have a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. On the regular order of business, consideration, item number 1, consideration with possible action on the request to fill the following replacement positions and all subsequent vacancies resulting from internal transfers. We have an administrative clerk position at Public Works. Does anyone have any questions on this request? Okay.
Second.
All right. I have a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. On to number 2. Consideration with possible action on a request to reclassify the Housing and Zoning Enforcement Coordinator position to an Zoning Enforcement Supervisor. Does anyone have any questions or staff on this?
Just an observation, Chair.
Sure. Alder Johnson?
So I assume this to be for Director Steck-Schulte. And taking a look at the cost comparison and the fiscal impact calculation of $2,268. However, I noticed that in the hourly wage, the higher end was used. Are you able to confirm if in fact that is the hourly rate that's being paid for that position? And what I'm trying to impact is in fact $2,268, or if it's actually greater, using the actual amount that's being paid to that position right now.
Yeah. Director Folds, I don't know if you can probably respond to that question.
Yeah, I can jump in. I guess I'm wondering, what are you asking for? The new pay that's going to be used or the current pay? What's the question on that?
Right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a Housing and Zoning Enforcement Coordinator, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And for this to be reclassified as a supervisor, and it's being argued that the fiscal impact is $2,268. But in the calculation for the comparison, the coordinator role was the maximum high end of the calculation. And so what I'm trying to determine is if this is training, meaning, right, are we actually paying that position $34.90 an hour right now, or are we paying them on the lower or somewhere in the middle?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, so the individual right now, that is the current wage that they are receiving. So that is the correct wage that is being used.
Okay, so when we're looking at and I hope you appreciate the importance of the question paid, for example, on the lower end of that, the true fiscal impact is much more significant. And that's just kind of what I was looking.
Yep, I understand. So we have someone in the position right now, and they will be going from the coordinator to a supervisor. And based upon that, it'll be similar to our 3% increase that someone would get for a promotion.
Okay, and I appreciate that. And then, I guess aside from that, the explanation made sense of why we want to do this. And Director Steck, so I better frame this and understand it. And I'm going to use names simply because we do have people in this role, and it helps, I think, all of us understand it a little bit better. But right now, Van Kelster, would he be the one that kind of performing these duties? And what we're trying to do is strip some of these responsibilities off of his plate so he can focus on other things. Would that be correct?
I think that's It's a very fair assessment, Alder Johnson. Essentially, right now, the building inspectors and housing inspectors all due to report to Mr. Van Calster. Just in terms of, as we're looking at the internal organization with Director Folds and with Assistant Director Ryder Wig, thought it would be kind of better off and maybe allowing the building inspection folks to focus more on the actual building inspection, commercial inspections, those aspects, code enforcement, the things that they're really more targeted towards doing, and then actually separating off the housing inspection team to focus on literally the housing and zoning code enforcement aspects. The one main advantage we really do see that, and they are different in terms of, certainly I think in terms of some of their skill sets between the two groups, but also in terms of the housing inspectors also do interact with the public, I think a little more regularly in terms of dealing with different complaints and issues. So the two teams, while certainly similar, they do operate a little bit different ways. So we felt that this was an opportunity certainly to move that. We looked at several things, including, allowing building inspection to focus a little bit more on quality control items as well. Not that there's a huge issue, but I think it just in terms of allowing them to provide a little bit more focus on those particular issues. Looking at how to actually grow and expand services. One of the conversations I've had with Mr. Van Calster is, adding something like fire inspection services to the repertoire of what the department can offer, which I think would be extremely valuable in terms of not having to send that out to someone else. Again, certainly talking about increasing, review accuracy and reducing approval time for those types of commercial aspects. It just allows that department to really focus really primarily, I think what their real kind of their true focus is from the building inspection side of things, as well as creating an opportunity for the housing inspectors, I think, to again focus really on what on their aspects and kind of working with the city and other housing issues. So it just seemed to make sense from my standpoint. From a logistical standpoint, it helps me in that we actually have direct reports going to Assistant Director Ryder Wig in terms of the inspection, while planning and economic development will continue to report directly to me in terms of staff. So we feel this was a logical flattening, I think, of the department a little bit, instead of having everybody under one, kind of moving them up to having two more workable teams.
Yeah, and I think that realignment actually makes a lot of sense to me as well. So do we have a court? Basically, we're going to bump into this supervisor role. Is that correct? We already have an internal transfer? Okay. And could you just also walk me through, because one of the common bits of feedback perhaps that I'm receiving right now is obviously we're in a pandemic, we're encouraging people not to interact, but we do get non-safety complaints at a time when material costs are going through the roof, and also it is increasingly difficult to find contractors because really you just have a labor shortage. Could you just walk me through that in terms of how our department right now is responding to those types of complaints and how it might actually intersect with this position, if at all?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think in terms of really both building inspection and housing inspection, I do, we certainly do, we agree, Alder Johnson, that there are certainly challenges out there for folks needing to comply, what those rules are. Technically, our codes and ordinances aren't set up to, especially the health and safety ones, are really not really set up to be, something that can be, deferred, without an end, certainly, but allows some degree of interaction. The inspectors, what we're kind of doing now is, if it is something that is not a critical health and safety type of issue, we're asking, if they have been issued certainly either not a citation or warning or some sort of letter, and if it is kind of an economic issue in terms of, we're asking them to kind of provide a plan to us in terms of how and when they can address that. So if we're giving an applicant, we have an example right now. There's a graffiti complaint we have on a particular site that they said that they have received a reinspection notice in terms of trying to get something painted over. Well, the issue they responded back to us and actually copied me on was that the temperatures have not reached a point where the paint will properly adhere to the materials that they need to paint. So they're going to do it. They're ready to do it. They simply can't do it until the paint has made that level. So we asked them to provide kind of a plan on how they intend to correct the compliance issue. So they've allowed to do that. We forward that on. I work with Mr. Van Calster then to say, is this a reasonable response? If yes, we're giving them the addition and granting them the additional time to get the work completed. So we can do similarly things with housing inspection if it's an economic issue, but there's a path forward on how to get it complied with. And it's not a health and safety issue. It's more of a cosmetic issue. We are trying to encourage some degree of flexibility, while certainly still trying to encourage folks to certainly take care of their properties and maintain them as are required by the codes and ordinances of the city. It does allow, I think, each individual team to be a little bit more hands-on and react to those particular cases on a case-by-case basis. And again, we're certainly not, compliance is always the goal. It's not to find people as often as we can. It's not to go out and make things more difficult for them. It's to try to get properties maintained and try to get, say health and certainly health and safety things, but even the cosmetic issues, and property values safely maintained for all properties in the city. So we do feel that this will provide both opportunities, both divisions, both housing and building inspection to provide a little bit more focus and some flexibility as needed to deal with those particular types of issues.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation. And as I mentioned, I'm supportive of this move. This makes a ton of sense to me to free up some capacity and bandwidth there. And like I said, I appreciate the explanation of what's happening. I would just simply request, because I've gotten this feedback from a number of residents, sometimes the inspections department's approach can be a little heavy-handed, and I appreciate why it's structured that way. But I hope that as this position transitions into a supervisor role, that we can perhaps reevaluate our strategy to determine how we get the results that we're looking for, while at the same time maybe showing maybe a little bit more compassionate side of government that recognizes the challenges and circumstances that exist out there, and actually appearing as though we're an organization that wants to help our residents rather than penalize them.
Understood, sir.
All right. Alder Dorf.
Thank you. And I'm glad to see it's going to an exempt supervisor position. Does that mean that there would not be overtime paid once it gets into an exempt position?
I believe
see Pam
that is the
nodding.
case.
Yes, and so that actually can save us money in the long run. It's good to go to exempt positions at some point. If the supervisory work is needed, it seems it is. And so I move that we accept this position, this change in positions.
Hold on a second before we get a second on that. Alder Steuer.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just had a comment a little bit off of what Alder Johnson. Director Falls, you have grade J showing the hourly rate, and then you have grade K showing the yearly rate. And I'm just wondering if, for transparency's sake, we could put both of them, or what's your take on that?
I'm sorry, you cut out there. What was the question at the
Well,
very
the question is, I just looked grade J, you have the hourly rate for grade J, and then grade K, you have the yearly rate. So just for transparency's sake, it would be nice to have one or the other or both, maybe have them both listed, just so we had an idea what it entailed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so I think when we have the wage rate for hourly employees, we have that listed on the left for the Housing and Zoning Enforcement Coordinator, and then it has a salary below it. Typically with our exempt employees, we don't have the wage rate for them. But what
Okay.
I can do is hopefully I can
Well,
I
let's
always
just,
tell people I'm not a mathlete, but the hourly rate for this position, I believe, will be $35.85.
okay. Well, I'm just saying, just reading it just looked like apples and oranges, even though I know it's all finance. So
Yep.
that's all. Thank you.
All right. So I had a motion to approve. Can I get a
Second.
second? I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I guess that passes unanimously.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Item number 3, request to restructure the Assistant City Forester position by creating 2 forestry supervisor positions to replace the Assistant City Forester position, and approval to fill the positions and all subsequent vacancies. Staff?
Director Ditchard, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I guess why don't you lay it out, Joe, and then I will answer any questions and follow up.
Sounds good. So what we have here is we just had a retirement with the city forester, which you are aware of, and then we had a our assistant forester get promoted to the city forester. So we had a vacant position with the assistant position, and Director Ditchite and Brian Pilat looked at their organization, looked at the forestry department, and determined that it would be more useful to have 2 assistants to help with the day-to-day operations. Because previously we had the city forester and the assistant forester sharing the overall big picture strategic planning for the forestry division and the day-to-day operations. Now when we add that assistant forester position, and which is going to be a supervisor, we'll have 2 supervisors who are able to oversee the day-to-day operations on the east side and the west side of City of Green Bay, and then have the city forester who oversees the whole division and more of the planning and big picture for the forestry division. And then when we get to the finance, I'm going to struggle with this a little bit, so I might have to turn it back over to you, Dan, or to
Sure.
the finance department to walk us through that.
Sure, I'd be happy to help you through this. So as Director Faulds mentioned, the big purpose for the restructure is to allow more time for our city forester to focus on kind of the big picture items instead of the day-to-day operations. So they would look at strategic planning. They'll work with the different departments on various projects, tree planting projects. We do a lot of work with DPW, with our forestry department. We can also do improved public education as part of this. And also we feel customer service will be improved because now the forester would have more time to work one-on-one with the residents of Green Bay. When it comes to the budget, what we're proposing to do is fill both of these positions starting June 1st of this year. And by doing so and starting June 1st, there would be a 0% budget increase in the 2021 budget. And if you look at the breakdown there, how we would achieve that is there is a cost savings by the city forester retiring and the assistant forester moving into that position. And then obviously when we fill the assistant forester position, they'll start at a lower level than our previous assistant forester was at. So there'll be a cost savings of about $13,000 to $14,000 just with that alone. And then in addition to that, as we're looking through our budget for the year, we feel that we do have a lot of chemicals currently in hand to get us through the year. So we're able to reduce our chemical costs for this year by not having to purchase it because of the chemicals we had stockpiled from last year. In addition, the forestry division's having a tough time filling seasonal positions also, just like everyone else is. And so we feel that we'll be able to, our seasonal positions will be short a little bit this year. So we'll be able to make up the funding for the new position starting June 1st in our 2021 budget. When it comes to the 2022 budget, that's when we're going to have to purchase chemicals again to be more in line with where we were at previously. So there will be an increase to the budget starting in 2022. So the first section there shows that there'll be a total increase of the budget of $93,864. That's just the expenses involved with the new position. So that would be the salary, health insurance, assuming it's a family rate. We don't know, who would be going into that position. So we don't know if they would need insurance or not. The dental's included along with retirement and other things. And when you get into that bottom box on the next page of the attachment, it shows you what the actual budget impact is going to be. And that's where we calculated the savings by filling the position. So there, like I mentioned previously, there'll be a savings of about $13,000 just by filling the two positions in next year's budget at a lower level than what the current or most recent employees were making. So the total impact to the budget comes out to about $80,500. And because stormwater account pays for 88% of the forestry budget, The stormwater utility would fund 70,000, almost 71,000 out of that 80,000. And then the park budget pays the remaining 12% of the forestry budget. So there would be a net impact to our park budget by about $9,000, $9,000 to $10,000 in next year's budget. And we feel with some budget cuts next year, we can easily make up that $9,000 to $10,000 in the park budget. So that's a summary of the finances. I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you would have.
Does anyone have any questions for Director Distash? Alder Johnson.
Other than the desire to focus on more initiatives, I mean, has the actual workload or scope or responsibilities changed for the forest?
It has changed throughout the years, and it's a little bit each year that we're adding to their scope of duties. So the city keeps growing. So every time we add a new subdivision, we plant trees in the right of way that our foresters have to maintain. And in addition, we continue to purchase parkland and plant those areas. We continue to purchase greenways and keep those areas maintained. So it's hard to say that there was any, 1 year where there was a substantial increase to the duties. It's just been accumulative over the years that's happened. And, we're at the point now where the forester and the city forester just working with operations takes up 80 to 90% of their day, just quitting the operations to where it is now. And so we've really been struggling to really focus on the planning for that division. So if you have additional questions, we also have our new city forester in this meeting. Brian Pilot is here. If you have more specific questions for him.
No, I guess I'm just trying to I have really two sets of questions. One, of course, focused on what increased workload. I mean, we're essentially adding a position, right? So I think there has to be a strong understanding by all of us that, in fact, that there's more work within that department than there, for us to feel comfortable with supporting that recommendation. So I appreciate the explanation, Director, that you provided, and I think that answers that question for me. The other question that I have, though, and this is an item that I've been intending to talk to the law department about, but because of the nature of this position proposal, it's making me contemplate this more quickly than I had anticipated. And forgive me, because it wasn't my intent to spring this on you, this meeting, but we are, under the stormwater budget, we are calling for 88% of this position to be funded through stormwater fees. I was reading in the municipality recently, and this might be, I don't know if this would be finance department or perhaps city attorney, about the League of Municipalities' effort to have the governor allow municipal property tax levies to grow at the rate of inflation and to delete language in the levy limit law requiring communities to reduce their levy when switching to a fee to pay for certain services like stormwater, fire protection, and garbage collection. So my fear with this is we basically switched. We went from paying for the forestry department with the levy to now paying for the forestry department with the fee. I haven't actually seen the language, but the context of this suggests to me that we might not be in compliance. And I'm a little reluctant, at least today, to approve the creation of a new position that relies on something that may not be in compliance unless someone on staff on the spot is able to verify or, corroborate kind of what's happening there. I know it's a lot to take on, and literally, Dan, I would have called you beforehand, but I just stumbled across this.
Yeah, and this is the first I'm hearing about that. So I have not done any research into that. I would not be able to answer that question at this meeting.
I'll take a shot at it. I believe what it's referring to is that And your levy limits, you're not allowed to completely switch a service off of the levy onto another fee, right? So in case of stormwater, we already had a stormwater fee in place. There are some municipalities who did not, and they had that on their levy. So they don't allow you to now take a stormwater fee and put it onto the water bill, like we already had in place. Since we already had it in place, I don't believe it's an issue. I believe that we are okay with that. We didn't have any expenditure restraint issues when we made the change a couple of years ago. I don't know, Diana, if you have anything to add to that.
No, I would agree with what Pam is saying. That is any additional new fees that you're putting on, taking off the levy and now putting it onto your residents. This would not be a new fee.
Okay. I mean, acknowledging that, I would feel a lot more comfortable if we had legal review of that. I'm okay saying, hey, contingent on, having the legal department just review that, because my biggest fear, right, is that we add this position, recognizing that that's how it's going to be funded. We find out that we're not supposed to fund it that way. And then now it's got to be paid for through the levy, but we maybe don't have the ability to pay for it through the levy. And then we end up laying staff off, right? So that's what I'm ultimately trying to avoid. So if we can just, as a rider, perhaps to this motion, include legal review of that particular provision. And so that when it comes to council, we can be confident that that won't be an issue.
You making that motion, Brian?
Sure.
I'll second it.
Now, before we vote on this, I have a motion and a second to approve this on the condition that the law department reviews this to see if there would be any conflict, as Alder Johnson has explained. Speaking to the law department, would we be able to have that information before the council meeting?
We can look into that. I'm hopeful that we can.
Because obviously if it's not there, then it's going to be delayed 2 weeks or more until we can get that information.
Yeah. I guess
I will see what our department can do to get an answer before then.
All right. All right.
Could someone let Alder Gerlach in, please? She's waiting in the waiting room.
Virtual timeout.
There she is.
There she is. All right, then. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No, that's unanimous, and it passes with that caveat on it. On to item number 4, consideration with possible action to add the grant administrator position to administrative services and fill the position and all subsequent vacancies, internal transfers. Staff.
And I apologize. I forgot to include the job description in the personnel agenda. I did email that to the committee before the meeting, so if you have a chance to look that over, just let us know. And I can obviously let Director Ellenbecker speak to this more, but I believe the auditors, Baker Tilly, recommended that we have a position that helps oversee the federal funding coming in and to help kind of provide some guidance on what to use with that and really provide a strategy with what to use with it. And then also this position would help also be a full-time position to help the comptroller's office with future grants and other internal controls. So the financials is also included, that it would be a full-time position that we're hoping would be financed by the federal funds, at least through 2024. And then after that, it would be levy supported. So I'm not sure, Director Ellenbecker, if you want to add anything else to that.
Correct. Thank you, Joe. Because of, we are looking, the American Rescue Plan Act, the ARPA, we are expected to get the first half of that money in May of 2021, next month. And that's going to could be over $12 million that we'll be receiving. And then within another year, or at minimum, another year, we'll get the other half of it. So we're talking over $25 million worth of expenses. Honestly, just knowing how much time it took for us to maintain that we got this last year of $1.9 million, that we believe that this could be almost a full-time job, watching compliance for this grant, monitoring the expenditures for eligibility, doing financial reporting for that, for the committees, doing financial reporting for audits, making sure we're following all the procurement, attending meetings that pertain to the strategic plan of how we're going to spend this money, just updating reports, following up on action items. This is going to be a huge task. And so this is requested only contingent on when the federal guidance comes out in mid-May, whether or not we will be able to use some of the $25 million that we're expected to receive, that we've been allocated to pay for this position for the years in which this grant runs. I will let you ask what other additional questions you have.
Does anyone, Alder Johnson?
Thank you, Chair. Director Ellenbecker, I just did some quick math on this. So if we did assume through the end of 2024 with the fiscal impact that's calculated here, and I'm using 3.5 years as the calculation, we'd be looking at about $328,000. Do you know, with respect to the funding coming from the federal government, do they allow, have they, I guess, identified what percentage we're able to withhold for administrative purposes?
That guidance has not been issued yet. Again, that should be coming out. I think they're expecting May 11th. We're supposed to be getting that guidance. That's the dead date, and that is the same time we should be receiving our first half of the money. Honest, I would be looking at probably 4 years for this position, and the reason why is we have to have it all spent by December of 2024. However, with that, there is a lot of follow-up and a lot of reporting that I would expect that. So truly, I'd be looking at a 4-year position. So if you were to truly look at the calculation, I'd be looking at 4 years, probably spring of 25 before, if there was no other projects or no other funding, I would still ask for 4 full years of spring of 25. Again, we will not, this would be only contingent on the approval of the Treasury saying that you can use this money for administrative costs. We have been on other calls with other finance directors from the state of Wisconsin, and many of them are looking, any of the bigger municipalities are either looking at contracting out or hiring additional staff. Again, for the same reason, they just don't believe that they can handle it themselves. And there is the assumption by the other finance directors that this will be covered, but we aren't 100% sure. With the assumption, it's there. I know at some point you could say, well, let's just wait another week, another month to determine whether or not it's going to be covered. A couple things is, as soon as this money comes in, I know we're going to start talking about strategic planning, and we're going to start coordinating efforts on how we're going to maybe start spending this money, and we're going to need to start coordinating, pulling meetings together. So this started would be preferred. And again, all this does is if it gets approved by council next at the next council meeting, it just gets us starting to post the position and have somebody start, they could start applying for this position. We would never approve this position until it would be 100% allowed to be paid for by the Treasury through the guidance. And then second, and this is Joe had talked about it, Carlson Detman also helped grade this position. And I'll let Joe kind of talk to, but he had just said, he's like, yeah, there's not too many people that have actually moved forward quite yet on this. So we could be potentially out in the market and one of the first ones to potentially try to pull this kind of resource or these expertise in. So that's the only reason why it'd be nice that it's only going to be, we would only hire somebody contingent on the money being available. But
yeah, and I'm okay with the position. I respect how much work actually comes with administering a lot of these grants. I just, more than anything, just really wanting to probe if the grants will in fact cover those. I mean, stuff that comes from the federal government, they allow, I think, 20% on block grants. I'd be shocked if they didn't at least allow 10% administrative withholding on something of this size. The other that I think about, I'm a little reluctant to support this as a levy position afterwards without any acknowledgement of what workload, if any, is going to be required once this grant expires. And so I'm wondering, Director Faulds, if you could perhaps talk us through the legalese, I guess, of having a limited term employee for a period of 4 years. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, that's a possibility. We can do that, especially when it's designated for the grant funds. And I'm not sure if I didn't know if you were going to ask if you would like to expand more upon what the duties would be outside of the grant. I think Director Ellenbecker or Director Manley could speak to that if that's what you were wondering as well.
I can just jump in again. Correct. I believe that there's going to be some highs and lows with this. There's going to be some busy weeks that's going to be, asking them to spend more than 40 hours on it. But then there could be some times when it's just not quite as busy. And that's why we had basically, when we put the job description together, we kind of backfilled it with an internal audit program. So that internal audit really supporting the finance group. And at this point, again, the first 4 years would be to be paid for by this grant. And then if this position does turn into a bigger position, no matter what, it would have to go into an annual budget and get approved, knowing that at one point we've decided that we know it's only funded at this point with 4 years. You're saying, Alder Johnson, that maybe we should label it as a limited term, and I guess 4 years is a long term time. It's not like somebody is just starting the position, get warmed up into it, and then it ends. I thought maybe recruiting is easier if it doesn't have limited term on it, but I am certainly willing to fill this position if that's the recommendation. We would certainly could call it a limited.
And I think 4 years is a long time, and people will read that if they're going to apply for it. My only fear, right, is if it's not if you label it as a permanent position, it really kind of obligates city council to renew it or make the lay people off. And we know that decision is never made. So I would feel more comfortable labeling it as an LTE. And if we, at the end of that 4 years, say, hey, we've got new grants, we have new opportunities, new things. Clearly we could have that conversation well before the end of that 4th year as well. We would have some light at the end of the tunnel, but I like being more transparent with candidates up front that at the end of the 4 years, there's not necessarily a guarantee that we'll have a role here if there's not a way to fund it. We have a lot of demands that are being placed on the levy right now. Without having a global conversation about priorities, that's why I'm a little reluctant to obligate future levies, without really understanding what work it is they're going to do once this grant is expired.
Alder Dorf.
Thank you. I know with this, when I work with the school district, LTEs certainly took a financial hit in that they were not allowed to be in the retirement program for the state. Is that the same with city LTEs? Right. So I would be very opposed to have this labeled as an LTE position. Pam?
I just want to say that it's based on the number of hours that they work in a year, whether they're WRS eligible or not. In this case, we are requesting that it would still be a full-time, 40-hour a week, 2,080 hours a year position qualified for WRS.
That's good. I also think, though, why do we need to do that? It's laying off someone either way. It's either at 4 years, maybe we'll give you another job, or at 4 years, maybe we'll give you another job, because we don't know. And so I think we would get a better candidate if we did it as a limited term, where they might look out for a position. And after 4 years, we don't want to continue it. It's the same result. The end result is the same. However, in my experience, grant coordinator, they bring in money. They are good at what they do, and they normally bring in far more money than what their salary is. And I've had experiences with grant coordinators through the Green Bay Area public school system. I assume that we do write grants for the city. I've seen that. So I think that there's definitely potential for this person to pay for their own salary in addition to continue getting more grants. I feel very reluctant to label this as LTE, because either way, at the end of 4 years, we could eliminate the position or we could eliminate the position. It's the same thing, but I don't want it labeled.
Okay. Alder Corpus Stacks, do you have any questions or comments? You're on mute. Your cat did it.
I don't have any questions, but I see both sides of Alder Johnson and Alder Dorf's arguments as to whether or not to label it an LTE. I do want the best candidate, but I do want to be transparent and say, like, right now, it's you're funded using this grant money, and we don't know afterwards. whether or
Right.
not we'll be able to maintain this position. So I'm kind of stuck.
Okay.
Alder
Thank you, to
Galvin,
be honest.
If I could just for a second, I have a couple questions and then I'll entertain some other comments from alders. For HR, if this is an LTE position, if that's what we end up doing here, would that person be eligible to transfer into any other job within the city during that 4-year time period?
Yeah, we would treat them like they'd be eligible to do that.
Okay, so if say it's LTE, and so we're advertising it as a 4-year position, and someone transfers into the city after 3 years, leaving 1 year on that job, that could make it hard getting someone who wants to come in just for a year. On the other hand, might be a perfect job for someone with a perfect experience who thinks, maybe I just want to do something different before I retire fully, and I'll do this for 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, I think like that in my head too. And then the other question I had was, would this position, this is for Director Ellenbecker, would this position in fact have the time to be able to, while auditing this grant money, be able to look for other grants available for the city? Do you think there'd be that kind of time?
I think there is a possibility. I said I think there could be some highs and lows with this position.
Okay.
I just think, well, to get some things up and running, it's going to be a very busy position. I think once it's in place, I think the first year is going to be crazy. I don't know. I'm not sure if there's going to be a lot of time in the first year, but when the program is in more play, things you're just waiting for projects to finish. I think there could be some potentially free time to be looking for additional grants. And so that's why we struck, that's really why you didn't see the job description necessarily, but number 8 says serves as the administrative lead and primary point of contact for the American Rescue, the meetings, the strategic planning, updating the progress reports, following up on action items. But that truly is only one of 9 items on this list, because
Sure.
we believe that first year is going to be very heavy laden on the American Rescue Act plan. Then it's going to be the follow-up of the other items, the other things that are being spent out of this money. But I do think there's a chance that within the following year, 2 year, 3 year 4, that there will be potentially some free time with additional grant responsibilities, which would be what Alder Dorf and yourself have mentioned. Or continue to look at internal audit programs, auditing items within our office, including grants or any other items that maybe should be looked at it a little bit closer.
All right, because someone on this committee had a brilliant suggestion a year or more back about having a full-time grant writing position where we wouldn't have people that are, say, public work employee trying to learn how to write grants or look for grants. But if we had someone that was centrally located at City Hall, and obviously they could reach out for expertise from the different departments. But, it is what it is. And that brilliant idea just didn't come to fruition. But, and I don't want to hire this position with us thinking that it's going to necessarily happen. If it doesn't happen, I mean, this grant could turn out to be a ball of worms or snakes, depending, and it may never happen. It may, if it does happen and it does prove to, at least in part, make it a worthwhile position, it could be something at the end of 4 years we could make permanent if it does go LTE. And I'm still trying to make up my mind what I want to do. I mean, I want to be upfront and honest with someone that's applying for the job. I don't want to limit our ability to hire people, though. But at the same time, I also understand where Alder Johnson comes, because we have seen jobs that have been created, and then through osmosis, they're just there. And also someone goes, hey, what, not that it's ever gotten as bad as Seinfeld and George just sleeping underneath his desk all day, but that has happened, not just to us, to other people. So if any other alders or staff has any other comments or questions, Alder Johnson.
Thank you, Alder Galvin. The question I was going to ask before, you alluded to it with the individual that had the brilliant idea, because so I think the administrator, when you brought it forward, I thought it had merit. right? But I was recalling the discussion that had occurred around that time, which was department heads or respective departments are better positioned and subject matter experts to be able to apply for those grants. I mean, Alderdorf does make a wonderful point. Writers are typically worth their salt.
Right.
But the feedback we were getting from department heads is that they didn't want the salt. So
that could be. I mean, that could be some of this silo issue that we're referring to. And if we were to break down some of those silos and have more departments understanding that one person who's got their finger, so to speak, on the grant situation out there could actually, they have to write everyone, but they could find good grants and turn them over to those departments to then write on and assist them in writing it. Because I could see if you took a cop and said, here, write this grant. I mean, he may be a subject matter expert on tasers and use of force, but sometimes these grants are very, very complicated, and having a grant writer available to walk them through it would make that person a better employee going down the road. But also, again, find us those monies that we are desperately looking for to keep our tax base down, or not a tax base, but our tax levy down. Oh, yes.
If I could jump in real quick.
Sure.
Again, not only, I know we talk about grant writing, and so that's very important on the front end to even see whether or not we're qualified, but there is a lot of financial reporting that is involved with any grant, especially when it's a WEDC and some federal and HUD grants. I see other directors shaking their heads. There is a lot of time and a lot of effort that is put in on the back end once it's finally, we have a grant policy, says we have to meet all these milestones, we have to do this reporting, we have to meet these metrics, we have to record them, we have to track them, we have to make sure they're following all the compliance. And so that we already we try on the finance end, we already are trying to get involved in each one of these grants. And at year end, when we have our year end audit, there's something called the Schedule of Expenditure and Federal Awards. And that is a very complicated spreadsheet that needs to be pulled together, and that tracks all of the any federal state grant dollars that we get. We have to put this award together. We have to work with our auditors. This past year, it took us about a week and a half to work with our auditors to get the schedule together. First year with new auditors, but it took a long time. So this person would not be just doing this one grant. So they certainly maybe would be working with the other departments to help write the grants. But again, there's a lot of compliance and reporting. Some of these are semi-annual, some are quarterly, some you have to draw down, some you have to show all the expenditures that go with them. So this person is going to get involved more than just this grant if and when they have some free time. So kind of your point, I know you're talking about grant writing, get new grants on the front end, but the problem is sometimes we can't get grants if we don't close out old grants. And we had that situation with WEDC. We didn't have a WEDC grant closed out fast enough. And at that point, they weren't willing to give us another one until we closed out a previous one. And right now we have 3 active WEDC grants for our shipyard and our rail yard. And if I'm going to shake like Matt Buchanan would know how much time it's taking on just those 3 grants. So it's not quite front. It doesn't in the job description talk about front end grant writing, but there's so much compliance that this person would be working with every one of those departments who are the subject experts on if they think that grant, we would qualify for a grant, but there's certainly this person would be there to help manage and help make sure they're complying and all the necessary milestone reporting would be completed.
Okay. So if I understand you correctly, you're saying this position, we shouldn't really even throw that flag out there that it may be a grant writing position at this point in time. It could potentially if a lot of things. So, okay. It's good information to have moving forward. I mean, if it happens, that'd be great. But if it doesn't, I don't want to mislead anyone either. All right. Alder Johnson.
Thank you, Alder Gavin. I'm just going to make a motion. I'll let the chips fall where they may. I mean, this is a $66,000 a year position with full benefits, and it's a 4-year term. Like I'm not sure that labeling it as an LTE would actually deter applicants. And I think that long-term, if we are going to put a new position on the levy, I think we ought to have a very transparent discussion about the competitive nature of levy dollars and all of the other needs that our city has. So I am going to move that we approve this position contingent to contingencies. One, that it is LTE, and the second, that it is fully funded by the grant and not using levy dollars. That is my motion.
And before there's a second, can I ask one question? This might be for Joe. Would there be any way of putting something into a motion that, and I'm just throwing this out there for discussion, if we were to have a motion to make it not an LTE position, is there any way of putting some kind of calendar date in that position that 4 years from now that position would be reviewed as to whether it's going to remain a city position or it's going to be eliminated? And at that time, we would review to see if it was worth keeping it or to dump it.
Yeah, we could do that. I think that's where we come with the transparency of, do we call it LTE or do we call it full-time position? I think being transparent, saying that this is going to be a 4-year position funded by the American Rescue Plan Act funds. I think just being transparent with that, we can do that. And I think that'd be good for the candidate and good for the council as well.
So even if you're gone, Joe, and Director Ellenbecker's gone, and we're all gone, that 4 years from now, if we approve that position, whoever takes over your job one day, his calendar will go bleep, and there'll be this thing that says this position has to be reviewed or to either continue it or eliminate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like what Director Ellenbecker and Manley were saying is, we should be reviewing this position, 2 years from now to see, is there extra work that they're already taking on, and be planning for well before the 4 years are done if the position is going to continue or not. I think that'd be the best strategy.
Okay. Alder Johnson has a motion that this position be considered for approval if it's LTE. And what were the other 2 points there, Alder Johnson?
There's just one other, and that it's funded through the American Rescue Act dollars and not levy supported.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I'd like to make an amendment.
I'm sorry?
I'd like to make an amendment based on what you just all talked about. It doesn't have to be. We don't have to label it LTE. Isn't that what you guys just discussed, you and Director Falls, that it didn't have to be labeled that, but that it would be a 4-year position and it would be reviewed at the end of that time? Do we have to label it LTE?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, when you label it LTE, I mean, it's got a built-in end date. If you don't label it LTE, then it just it like auto renews. It becomes part of our annual budget, and that's the piece that I'm trying to avoid, unless I'm misinterpreting something.
Well,
I think Director Falls has
yeah.
something.
I think because we're going to be, transparent and upfront, that's going to be a 4-year position. We should label it LTE because it's limited.
Okay.
But I think then we
All
should.
right.
All right.
We'll tell.
And I'll second that. I'll second it
Director,
then if that's what you have to do.
Okay, we have a second, and Director Ellenbecker had a hand up.
Yeah, while we put that in, I'm okay with it being labeled as an LTE because it is a little more transparent. I would feel kind of guilty 4 years from now and say, whoops, your job's done. Oh, we forgot to tell you it's only a 4-year plan and we have no money for you. So I would feel guilty that way. Is there a way of labeling it as an LTE with a possible chance of continuation after 4 years? Is it kind of, so label it, but have it potential of a longer term? Is it something like that could be put in the job description, but there's no guarantee that it would be after 4 years, but there's always that potential? Or as Alder Galvin said earlier, or maybe, at 4 years, maybe there's another position that they could transfer into if this position was to end. Can we keep it kind of
So the way Director Ellenbecker, the way that I would visualize it, I don't feel like we need to include that in the motion, but I also have no objection to you putting that in there. The way that I would visualize this working is, if we know that the LTE is expiring in, what year is it? 21, let's say it's expiring in 25. Well, I would expect that the mayor at the time, when they're crafting their budget, would evaluate it and say, hey, do I budget levy dollars, half a year's worth, right, to accommodate the continuation of this position? Because then you're having that transparent conversation with city council to say, this is a new position being supported by levy dollars. Take this into account with all of the other demands on the levy, and you decide if it's worthy of maintaining or if there are other priorities that take precedence. That's kind of the approach that I would like to see. So I'm okay with saying that, hey, it could be reevaluated and it may continue at the will of the mayor and the council.
All right. And Director Falls?
Yeah, so we'll, what we talked about, we'll have that in the job posting as well, that it's LTE for your term. And we'll discuss with the candidates as well that there's an option for it to be renewed and it'll be reviewed. And we'll put that in the offer letter as well, that it's clear that's a 4-year term position with it being reviewed, maybe year 2, 3, or whatever that is. So we're transparent with the candidate. That is a limited term for 4 years, but it will be reviewed as well.
Okay. All right. All right, then. All those in favor?
Thank you, Melanie.
Aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. On to number 5, consideration with possible action to have staff study the need for more staff for the city attorney's office. This was my proposal. And I know the city attorney's office has been, the last couple of years has been under a lot of stress. And they've had a lot of expected work that out of the norm that they've been required to handle. I know there's been a lot of ongoing things that you could almost describe as like the infrastructure needed for the ongoing road repairs. That is always dragging at them, ordinances that need to be rewritten and things like that. But it's my back to when I was on the police department that when we had interaction with the city attorney's office, always top attorneys, always working really hard, but I always felt that they were behind the 8 ball with job duties and requests for reviews and other works to be done. I mean, I felt way back in mid 2000s or early 2000s, more staff. And I don't know exactly if it's more attorneys or more aides or whatever. But I really think I would really like to see a study or some kind of something be done to see exactly what are the needs for the city attorney's office, especially as we're getting into the budget cycle again and looking for.
Alder Galvin, but are you open to a discussion as well that would include staff versus contracted services and however we meet the objectives, or are you looking exclusively at staff?
Well, the reason why I'm looking is, we could do limited contract services. And for example, with treaty rights, it really makes no sense for us to have a full-time attorney whose specialty is into the treaty rights that the Native American tribes. So going out short term for things like that makes perfectly good sense to me. But there's been a lot of other things I think that have been overwhelming our staff, such as open records requests. There's been a lot of ordinances that are being rewritten. And there's been a lot of requests for new ordinances to be examined and rewritten. And it's just, it goes on and on and on. And I'm afraid that their to-do list is so long now, I'm not sure if there's any light at the end of the tunnel for them. And so that's why I would really prefer, it'd be easy to get a couple of the hot ticket things done, like the ethics policy and the tavern policy and a couple of those other ones that have been bothering some of us for years now, get those out of the way. But I think at the end of the day, when that's done, they're still going to have a mountain of work to do. And that's why I'd rather have a study done that determines, are we short-staffed? I look at other municipalities in this state, and they have far more attorneys than our city does. And, maybe that's a bad thing. Maybe they've got attorneys at these other municipalities sitting around with their feet up playing cribbage all day long. I don't know. But my personal feeling is that we could use more staff on a permanent basis for the city. Director Falls.
Well, you can never have enough lawyers, so that's a good thing there. But did that? Oh.
You broke up a little bit.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I just said you can never have enough lawyers, but that's just my personal opinion.
Spoken like a true lawyer.
You are definitely not helping, Director Falls.
Yeah. Now start the lawyer jokes.
So with I know with Alder Weary, I think he reached out and he wanted to look at the short term of projects and what we can get help for the attorney's office. And I know Alder Galvin, you're kind of looking at the long term. So it depends on what the committee, and you're looking at long term and short term. But it's up to the committee what you decide, but the HR department has no problem working with the law department and doing a salary study, not a salary study, but a study of our comparables, comparing us to other municipalities in Wisconsin and seeing what we need for attorneys and based on positions, and also looking at the need for the law department. So it's based on what the committee decides what to do, but we can work with the law department to do that study. And then I know Attorney Chavez has looked at some of the short-term needs and some options with that if you want to explore that any further.
Exactly. I don't mind this taking, a turn to the right for the long-term needs and then take a quick look here at the short-term needs, because there are some needs that have been ongoing for a long time that just aren't being met. And so, I mean, if it's okay with the committee and if everyone thinks it's appropriate, we could cover both of those today, right now, with this one item. Alder Dorf.
I told Alder Weary I would read what he wrote.
Okay, sure.
Alder Weary wrote, "Howdy, please read my comment into the minutes. I'm fully behind either or hiring temp or permanent legal staff to catch up on legal work. Not only is the office under great pressure to produce the city council's items that have been sitting for years, and this means the entire city is on hold waiting for action on issues that have to go to the law office. Thanks, Alderman Chris Weary." That's from him. And now from me, when I talked with Attorney Chavez before budget, and I had the conversation with her at that point, she wanted to wait and she wanted to look at what the needs were. And then she was going to come back to us. So Attorney Chavez, are you still of the same feeling of wanting to wait and come back to us? Or where are you at right now with this whole issue?
So as far as the needs of the department, I don't think there's any dispute that our department needs additional attorneys to keep up with the amount of work that's generated by the city. You guys are a very active group. There's lots of stuff that's happening and lots of stuff that you guys are asking of us to complete, and it is causing some significant time delays when we do get hit with a lot of things that are coming through. And at this point, I don't anticipate that this new influx of work is going to decrease anytime soon. So we've been hit in the last year or so with increased litigation. We've been hit with increased records requests. We've had more grievances occurring before this committee. We've just had a lot of new work that hasn't historically been there. And just with the current situation at a national level, I don't think that those are going away anytime soon. I think the increased litigation against the city is likely to happen for the foreseeable future, given the current state of affairs. I think that the records requests aren't going to stop anytime soon, again, just because of the current state of affairs. And so I think that it is realistic for us to anticipate those needing to be addressed on a long-term basis. I had actually done a lot of research back in 2019 as far as what I felt we could do if we added another attorney versus if we added another 3 attorneys. And I can definitely bring that forward to you for consideration. As I think that's a much bigger discussion as far as the appropriate staffing levels for the department. I think that would really be best for budget and also giving us a chance to really figure out what will this new person, if we add a new person, what functions are they really going to cover, and are we going to be able to add anything new to the workload? So yes, I do think that it is important for us to start that discussion now, and I do think that something on a permanent basis is necessary. As far as addressing the current backlog, we've kind of been hit like a perfect storm, if you will. Because we've also had, people out for different leaves. We've had turnover in our department, and so we are backlogged pretty hard right now. And I agree with Alder Galvin that we just haven't been able to get to those things on a timely basis since I've started. And we got pretty good at one point, but then we get hit with new things. Like we got served with the new lawsuit today with regards to the Zoning Board of Appeals, and so now we're going to be spending time addressing that. So every time I think, okay, we're going to get through this little hump, and then we will be able to focus on these different ordinances and whatnot that are before the committee. we just haven't been able to. So I would advocate at this point for us to come up with a temporary solution until we can come up with a more permanent solution. So with that, I did reach out to a variety of sources over the last couple of days to see what I could bring to you all as far as a potential resolution. There are a number of municipal attorneys who do private practice work. Their numbers are pretty substantial, but I think that what we do, or their rates are pretty substantial, but I do think it's important that if we're going to have this work outsourced, it is outsourced to somebody who is aware of what the law actually provides for. We don't want to have to teach somebody how to draft an ordinance on the city's dime at $250 an hour. So paying for that expertise, I think, is worth it in this instance. I kind of focused on the 4 primary points I think are important to really make sure that we get those 4 items that really have been kind of just been the farthest backlog addressed. And those and one of them is not yours, Alder Galvin, only because I think that one is pretty close. And if we have the other ones done, we can get chapter 33 through on our end. But we would be proposing that the ethics ordinance, the social media policy, the emergency management ordinance, and now I'm forgetting which one it was. I'm sorry, our sign ordinance, that's the big one, would all be farmed out. Outside counsel, there's a couple of different options for us, but either way, I think if we're going to tackle those 4, we need to anticipate it's going to cost a minimum of $25,000 to $30,000. I also looked at the potential for hiring an LTE, but again, we need to hire somebody who is able to step in and not have to be trained. I can train somebody to do the work, but not effectively as an LTE to make it really worth it. So we would need somebody who would basically be a retired city attorney to come in and do this work. It isn't saying it's impossible to find somebody to do that, but we would have trouble finding someone just because I've reached out to the contacts that I have, including the league, and all of them are kind of like, I don't know anybody who's looking for an LTE position. So I think at this point, our best bet is really to contract out with outside counsel at a firm. I have reached out to Michael May, who is the former city attorney in Madison. He is of Council of Portman and Clark now. And I've also reached out to a couple of attorneys who specialize in fine regulations and social media policies. And that number, the 25 to 30, is really what I'm coming up with based on conversations with those people. And again, those are estimates, so it could go up or it could go down. The LTE is kind of an easier solution because we know that number is going to be static, but we might have trouble finding somebody who can do that for us. So, and before you all freak out, the new case that is before that we got, it's regarding a step back issue on one of the houses where they wanted to move it an extra foot over or something. So it's just another case that we're dealing with. Nothing exciting, I guess I should say.
So what you're saying, Attorney Chavez, is to get rid of some of the immediate backlog that's really been a thorn in our sides. You're looking at about 100 hours of work at roughly $25,000 to $30,000. Is that correct?
Yes.
Are you anticipating hiring, I don't know, like you said, I would think a subject matter expert would be a retired or city or municipal attorney, and it'd be a lot easier for them to step in. But you don't think we would need any other help until we took a look at our budget and staffing needs for next year?
If we are trying to get the documents drafted that have been really, I'm going to call them the bane of my existence at this point, but all those documents we've really just been trying to get in front of you that we just have not been able to dedicate the time to it. this is the solution for that. If you want the law department to no longer run behind and we're able to, so you guys are aware, we have like 40 ordinances that are currently in front of my office right now that we're trying to get back to you in some form or fashion. And there are different requests, like we've got the building code, the plumbing code and stuff like that. So we're working with the departments. We've got changes to various licensing. We've got some new drafts, such as the massage ordinance. We've got the massage licensing. We've got the potential for e-scooters or bikes or whatever we had originally discussed. So we've got a bunch of different documents out there that need to be addressed. So this is just really tackling those major ones that have just been so hard for us and have been such something that you guys have asked for a very long time. So no, this is not this will not bring us back to a point of not having a backlog, but this is addressing those items that we really have been trying to get to you guys.
Okay. And I'm not going to hold you to it, but could you just spitball how many hours of work you think is sitting on various attorneys' desks, like you just described, 40 some ordinances and other things? I mean, let's face it. Has your office had to do any of the chronic nuisance homes, where a few years ago the PD was actually taking homes away from people when they had chronic drug nuisance homes and that kind of stuff? If something like that came up, how much would that ball up your department?
So right now, the way we have our work separated, we have the city prosecutor who is handling most of the stuff related to nuisances. And so it really, we've been really fortunate in the sense that the amount of time that it's been dedicated in the past to ordinance violations is going down, just because the enforcement actions have kind of trended away from just doing straight citations. We've got more fee-based approach. We've got more, re-inspections and whatnot, instead of just writing citations out right off the bat. But
Right.
That has also created its own level of work and freed up opportunities for the nuisances. And so taking a much bigger part in that has kind of filled the prosecutor's time pretty well. So we're asking the prosecutor to step in different issues in order to bring those up, to move those forward. But her availability is pretty well dictated by what's going on with those two major areas. And then, of course, SORB. So she kind of acts as overflow. And I would say that the rest of the department is pretty hammered down right now. Like I said, we have about 40 ordinances. We've tried to send some of those off of the legislative attorney's plate to allow for others to not only get experience drafting ordinances, but also to see if we can get those in front of you guys sooner. So there are a couple of those that have been pushed to somebody else. In addition, we also have the grievances that have been coming up, and those actually take a lot of time to prep and make sure that we're getting you guys the information that you guys need, getting the documents prepped and conversing with the parties. We have the pending litigation. We have the complaint with the WEC that requires a response right now. I guess I shouldn't say the pending litigation. The litigation primarily falls in my lap, and we do have an excess of it right now compared to other years, although it's not definitely our highest point. But as far as being in a document-intensive position right now, we are pretty high as far as that goes. And we do have our paralegal who addresses most of that. We have a ton of contracts that come up on a daily basis. So it doesn't matter if it's somebody who just needs to get a hold harmless. Those really kind of push our own timeframes back, because then we have our deputy city attorney who is having to drop stuff in order to make sure that those hold harmlesses or those insurance agreements are happening so that work can start on projects and we aren't delaying things. We also have, like I said, we've had an unreal number of public records requests. We have one legal assistant who is dedicated to handling a lot of the records requests right now, but they still require legal review, and our deputy city attorney, between those and the contract, she's really tapped out, and then she still does PMP and handles all of the licensing issues. I handle pretty much everything else in the department. So whether it's litigation, whether it's the development, whether it's anything coming before RDA, anything coming before the council, I've been handling the election report. You name it, it falls on my lap. And so I'm trying to handle some of that ordinance drafting when I can, but realistically, when I'm looking at timeframes, the ordinances always fall to the bottom of the list because I'm always dealing with something else that's a lot more time sensitive. So this will not bring us back to, we probably have, I would say, I couldn't even gauge for you like how many hours I think everybody would have to work each week in order to bring us back to normal. I would say it's probably 50 to 60 a week to be able to get us back to a normal time frame.
So would we
And
be
that would be on
better
the
off?
ongoing basis.
Okay. Would we be better off then doing a 6-month contract with this firm or a retired attorney, instead of just trying to do this quick, get the stuff that's really bothering some of the alders the most, and then, basically you're going back to, the work jobs are by what's the most important, and the other ones get pushed to the bottom of the list.
If we are looking to make that change happen now, yes. The difficulty is finding somebody who can step in and fill that position before we're able to really figure out what is the proper person to fill this on an ongoing basis. Because if we're bringing in somebody now, it really needs to be more of like a deputy level position for an LTE. Whereas if we are bringing in somebody permanently to train, then they can come in as an introductory position, as an entry level position, and I can train them on how to do all this different stuff. But when I am trying to use the city's resources most effectively, when I only have somebody available for 6 months, it needs to be somebody who knows what they're doing. And I agree that is the best course of action, but just in the limited conversations I've had, I do think it might be difficult to find somebody and hiring a firm. Nobody who is of counsel is going to accept an LTE position. So it's really somebody who is truly retired or has stepped away from the workforce to do that.
All right. So you don't think like this firm who has this former municipal attorney working for it would contract him out for like, say, 6 months?
Not at a reduced rate, no. I did already explore that option, and what we discussed was that rates are established, and there's not a lot of opportunity to change their rates once they're with the firm. And so if we're looking for somebody to really act as an employee, essentially, be at our disposal for 6 months, that's finding somebody who is not currently attached to a law firm.
Okay. What about paralegals? I mean, could they do some of this work and maybe we hire that firm to take care of these things that have really been the biggest thorn, but then we do hire a paralegal for 6 months or a year until we figure out what our staffing needs are and if we're able to take care of those needs budgetarily.
We are utilizing the paralegals to the best that we can. I don't know that would solve our problems because a lot of it is still that it will still get bottlenecked waiting for attorney review.
Okay. So what's the most viable solution, you think, short term?
I think it's really what objective we're trying to accomplish. If we want to address these outstanding items that have just really gotten to the point where they need an immediate attention, then hiring outside counsel makes sense. If we are trying to if we're trying to relieve the workload issues and address all of the things that have bottlenecked in the law department, then that is really an LTE position.
Okay. Issues, these work jobs that are out there waiting, have any of them cost the city in any way, or could they potentially cost the city in any way if we don't either, one, get short-term help to get some of that out of the way, and then two, look for more permanent long-term help?
The biggest issue we run through right now is the social media policy. We need to have one that's in effect and clear for everyone, because there is the potential for First Amendment violations to come up. And so that is one that we have been having to monitor to make sure that nothing is happening yet. We're having to make sure that we step in right away, because there's not a clear policy for anybody. The sign ordinance.
Sure.
Signs are a big issue. Again, they're First Amendment related. And we don't currently have a functioning sign ordinance. Ours is not compliant with the Reed v. Gilbert standard from the Supreme Court. So it's just effectively not being enforced, which has created, I don't know that it's necessarily creating any legal issues, but it's definitely creating a lot of frustrations for the community. The ethics ordinance, it just needs to be redone.
Yep.
And it's really the code of conduct and the ethics ordinance. And then our emergency management ordinance, we have had to rely in the past on when we entered an emergency for the purposes of the riots the curfew that was imposed last year, we had to rely on what's available at the state level to really navigate that, because we didn't have anything in place at the local level and so while we aren't necessarily running into liability, having management ordinance in place clarifies things and makes it so that we can adapt more quickly in the event of an emergency. So that's a need as well. We've also identified a whole handful of other things. We get these grievances that come through. They're timely. They're time sensitive. We have, we've had an animal control ordinance that we've been wanting to revise for quite some time. And there's been a lot of interest, not only from some of the alders, but, staff and the community. It's not necessarily creating any liability for the city, because we regulate based on what we have, but it isn't necessarily allowing everybody to operate under best practices. Have the litigation that comes through, and it's difficult for us to be able to respond as quickly as we need to. We haven't dropped any balls yet, but it's not been easy to navigate all of those deadlines and make sure that we are not affecting the representation of the city. Some of them, we are asking for extensions whenever we can to make sure that we are able to address what the city needs.
Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate your insight. Alder Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Attorney Chavez, and I know I'm putting you on the spot with this, but I don't know the number off the top of my head either, but do we have anything budgeted for outside counsel?
Not really. So we have a budget every year of $25,000. This last year got bumped to 37 because of the anticipated litigation that we have currently ongoing. And within that, that includes not only our legal expenses, but, our licensing fees and really anything that comes up related to costs associated. So when we did the math, it really leaves about $10,000 for outside counsel. We anticipate that there's going to be one conflict every year with respect to muni court. So we budget about $3,000 if we ever have to hire outside counsel to handle the conflict. And so that leaves us really more like $7,000 to $8,000 to hire outside counsel for. 7 to 8 very, very fast. And in the past, we've used it for when we needed to incur costs for litigation that is already pending.
Okay. And then Alder Galvin, I'm just trying to wrap my brain around what you're trying to achieve long-term. And if it's trying to determine if what we, are we appropriately staffed? I think certainly one of the easy knee-jerk reaction thing to do would be, hey, let's look at the 10, largest municipalities and see what they have. And one of the things that perhaps would defer to Attorney Chavez on is, does the city of Green Bay inherently face different challenges than other communities for whatever reasons, right? Like, I mean, I just hate to say, hey, city of, I don't know, Beloit, Kenosha, comparable size. They have X number of attorneys, we have X number, but do they deal with other legal matters maybe that, are just unique to that geographic area or that municipality? So I'm just curious from the city attorney, if you feel that that would be a reasonable point of information or if it would be distorted.
So I guess let me just make sure I'm understanding what you're asking. Are you saying as far as our staffing levels compared to other municipalities?
Right. I want to make sure that if in fact that were a request, that we're comparing apples to apples and not apples to pineapples.
Yeah. So I had done some research a couple of years ago in anticipation of asking for another employee to be added to the department. And we did it based on population and the number of attorneys per capita. And what my research suggested is that we probably needed 7 attorneys in our department in order to be on par with the other municipalities who are like us. And I did the top 10. I'd have to go back and look at my numbers, but I'm pretty sure we did the top 10 municipalities as far as population goes, and then our most immediately surrounding us. And with that, my recommendation was going to be that we have 7 if we're trying to really be proactive about what we're doing.
Okay. Alder Dorf, your facial reactions are the best, by the way. When she said 7, the largesse of your eyes was magnificent there. So I'm just wondering, because obviously we have those short-term needs, and I wonder if it makes sense for us to maybe have staff come back to the next meeting and say, hey, these are the things that staff recommends that we could potentially outsource, and then we could talk about a funding source for that. And then at the same time, maybe referring to staff to come back to us with those comparable numbers that Attorney Chavez just referenced, so that we can start to maybe incorporate that into a long-term budget discussion. Does that seem like a reasonable approach?
Are you asking me or the committee?
Anybody who wants to. I mean, I'd be curious maybe to hear from staff's perspective if that's a reasonable approach.
Yeah, I have no issue with that. Like I said, I had done a while back, I had gone through and pulled together the information on where we stood in comparison to our neighbors. And then I'd also kind of established like what really did I feel like if we were to optimally staff the department, what would we take on? What areas are we not currently providing representation in that we would want to start doing for the city? So yes, I can definitely provide you guys with that information.
Yeah, and I think to me, it's just this acknowledgement that we recognize your department is underwater right now. And I think we all, really appreciate and respect the job that you and your team do. And we're sensing that maybe there aren't enough resources allocated to the challenges that are being presented to your department. I think we all just want to find a solution, but we don't want to, at least I don't want to burden you with more work that ultimately doesn't, get to what we need. But if it's something where you can come back and say, hey, here's 10 things that we can easily outsource. We think it's going to cost $50,000. Here's, and in the meantime, we'll work on a long-term proposal for council to consider. Like, I'd like to think that that's a reasonable approach, provided that it doesn't put too much of a burden on you.
That's completely reasonable.
I would agree. I think that's a good way to look at it. And I think it's a good way for the staff to take care of both needs. So short-term needs, which kind of gets you a little bit back on your feet, or a little bit, maybe just get your nose out of the water enough so you can breathe, while at the same time looking for solutions down the road. Because I'll be honest, Attorney Chavez, the numbers you just gave us, what you need for staff, is something that I've thought for years would be about the number that we would need. And I was kind of hoping that when I first got on council, we'd add a little bit here and a little bit there to ease you back up to it, but there's been no relief whatsoever. And it'd be interesting to see how much more we could do for this community as far as legal representation goes, if we had the right staff, the right amount of staff in place to make that happen. So I like that. If someone wants to make a motion, or if anyone wants to make any other comments before we have a motion. Alder Dorf.
Is the motion to refer to staff? Sorry, this didn't work. Is the motion to refer to staff? Because it's consideration with possible action to have staff study the need for more staff?
Sure. I think the motion was for the city attorney's office to come up with a viable short-term project or program, and then also over a longer period of time, but geared towards our budgeting, to come up with what they think they need, looking down the road long term. Where do we want to be in a year or two or three? You know, how much staff do we need to really do the job I think we should be doing? And I don't think we're doing that, and this is in no way disparaging our staff. You can only do so much. And I think you guys are doing everything plus some. I imagine you guys take work home at night. And I just think that we need to have staff that are able to do their job properly without having to worry about it and lay in bed at night thinking about everything that they're not getting done because we don't have the amount of staff that we need.
So that will be my motion.
All right.
All that, everything that you
Alder Corpus Dax?
Second.
You second? Okay. Before we vote, Alder Stoyer.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if I'm speaking out of turn here at all. I've been gone for a few weeks, but I'm just wondering about the COVID relief money, the 25 million coming to the city. Has there been any talk of any portion of that maybe going towards something like this? If not, I'm just asking.
Maybe Director Ellenbecker or Director Falls could answer. Yes, Director Falls.
Yeah, I'll try and answer that. And I think Director Ellenbecker has stated that the guidance is going to be coming out in hopefully the next few weeks. And I guess we're not sure what the funds can be used for, but I guess if whatever they're used for, we'll try to explore all the options and maximize what we can with it.
That's fine. That's all I ask.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes unanimously. On to informational. We have a report of routine personal actions. If no one has any questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Just one, Chair?
Yes.
Trying to find the packet. I mean, one of notable interest, I think that was on there that I didn't know was coming was promotion. Looks like we're filling a chief of staff role. I guess I'm just looking for some commentary, feedback from staff. If anything with that position is changing, is it the kind of same position description as when Chief of Staff Jeffries, former chief of that role? And I mean, pay scale, any of that, or how does that work? Because I think the mayor's office, those positions work a little bit differently. Others have to come to us, but these, Director Falls, I believe you told me, can just kind of occur within the budget. Could you just give us a little overview on that?
Yeah, I can do that. So the mayor's positions they're appointed by the mayor, and they're at the pleasure of the mayor, and they're approved through the budget every year. So what we have going on is Ahmad has been promoted to the chief of staff position with the typical promotion that salary change that comes with every promotion. And then moving into his position has been Matt Matusak from DPW. That's why we had the admin clerk position that's being open to request to refill. So at this point, the job duties for both the chief of staff and the community liaison position are staying the same, and they're going to continue as they were with when Celestine Jeffries was in the position.
Is there going to be a communication that goes out to the balance of city council on that? I mean, I just think that's a pretty important move, and city council should probably know about that one in particular, because that's a position we interact with quite a bit.
Yeah, so the positions should be starting next Monday, and the mayor told me that he anticipates to send out a communication to the council and to staff as well.
Okay.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
No, okay. Is that, do you want receive and place on file motion? Or
receive and place on file.
Receive and place
That's
on
okay.
file.
I'm okay with jumping ahead too.
But I'll second receive and place on file from Alder Corpus Dax.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, and then next meeting, May 11th, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Now.
Motion to adjourn. Aye.
Aye.
All right, we'll be back in 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Take a break.